Welcome to the Business Trendsetter podcast, where we talk about trends and how to use them to grow your business. My name is Manny Turan.
And I'm Hartung.
We are Spark Partners. We're here every week discussing how to grow your business. And we talk a lot about the demise of a business, which is a very important thing to consider if you want longevity in your business. But there's another side of this that has to do with a business launch. So you've got an idea, you've raised some money, you've got something that you've got in the background, you've done maybe a market search, and you've seen that there's an unmet need. There's a whole lot of elements that go into a business launch. Today, we're going to look at a couple companies that Adam kind of has looked at and seen the propensity for the success based on what we know, which is, of course, trends and business growth. And we'll go from there, and we'll talk about some of what it really takes to start a business and get that initial momentum in order to cross the chasm, as it were. Go ahead, Adam.
Okay. Yeah. So I actually met two startup companies. And what struck me was that the one which most people think is probably risky, I think is the lower risk and almost certainly going to be a success. Then there's another one which looks far less risky, I think is a really, there's a high probability it won't pan out. And so I think the reality that struck me as I was meeting these people, talking with them, was how in my 20 plus years of working with startups and identifying the path to success, how often the people have misconceptions and have the wrong idea where the risks lie when they're starting something up. So I'm going to kind of put that out there first, that as you know, I wrote the 450 approximate columns for Forbes. And the thing that struck most people when I quit writing at Forbes was that I'd never had a boner. I'd never really missed one. All of them had been accurate, pretty highly accurate. And the editors used to ask me how I could do that. And I said, well, most people have never sat down and really tried to figure out what would lead to business success in the early days of a startup. And I said they tend to invest on gut instinct, or they tend to invest upon something that they can more easily understand and avoid things they less easily understand. And so I said, if you look at the system the way we talk about it, at Spark Partners, it actually doesn't become that difficult to try to pick them out. So first of all, let me start with the one that I think is has a really high probability of success.
Okay.
And the thing that most people will be turned off by this business is that the startup on this business requires having a building that is at least about 300 foot on each side, right? So you have to have 300 foot wide by 300 foot deep building.
Okay.
Start with that. And it has to be completely climate controlled, meaning that to be able to maintain the temperature in this building, whatever you want, whether you want it to be 55 or you want it to be 75 or 80 degrees, you have to be able to have complete temperature control of the building, regardless of where it's located. And also you have to have sufficient surrounding infrastructure to support up to 300 or 400 people working in this, but they aren't the same people that come and go. Like a group of 300 comes in, and then after a couple, 3 weeks, they leave, maybe each couple of months. So you have to have like hotels and all this around for these people that come and go. So it's a big, big investment. And that turns a lot of people off because they say it takes all these millions of dollars to get it invested. But the big thing about this investment that I like, I'll get to in just a minute. So what do? A fellow sat down and he said, okay, when people are making programming, whether it's a movie or it's a TV show or it's a series for Netflix or anything, anytime you're making visual programming, okay, they would have to have a camera, and then you have to have an environment in which you shoot. So if you're making a movie, okay, and you have outdoors that you have to go to, then you have to shoot outdoors. So you can imagine if you want to do a driving scene, where do you do that? Well, you have to go get permission from a city or whoever owns the roadway to get it blocked off. Then you have to set up to use that environment. You're at the whim of the weather. If it turns out that you planned it all for nice weather and then it gets a rainy day, well, you're at the whim of the weather because you're outdoors. Yeah. So it can be very difficult. You try your best, but you have to plan these things in advance. You have actors that have to show up. They get paid for working. So you got to make sure you keep them productive, right? You don't want to have them sitting around for days on end. You have to have all these other people that are involved, the grips and all those folks that handle the microphones, that handle the cameras. You have to have sets that are created. So all this is part of making the magic of a presentation, right? What this person did was he watched what was going on in the filmmaking business, and he realized that there were so many uncontrollable variables that it dramatically raised the cost. And so if you wanted to have somebody in a street scene, for example, in Chicago or New York or some city, you are now having, as I said, to go get the permitting, you have to get the permission, you would have to get it blocked
Right.
up, you'd have to pay for the police to be there, you might have to pay for a fire truck to sit there watching this thing for safety reasons. Then you would have to, cordon off, you may not be able to let people get into their businesses or let people get into their homes. You might be trying to deal with like shooting at 4 o'clock in the morning and just the crack of dawn so that it's not so busy, but people aren't fresh, or you might be doing late in the day to try to, again, not catch it when it's too terribly busy. And again, so you have all these problems that you're dealing with trying to shoot outside. And he said, I'm going to recreate the outside inside. And what he did was he figured out how he could create a round ring that would act like a green screen. In other words, it would be all the way around at 360 degrees, not just a flat green screen behind somebody. And then what he did was he would go someplace like, say, Brooklyn, New York, and he would take and mount up a camera, and he would shoot 3,000 or 4,000 pictures. So he's shooting 360-degree pictures of New York, of areas of New York, like Brooklyn or somewhere. Now, he could do that without even having to get a permit to do that. He just takes all these photographs. Then what he would do is he digitizes the photographs and he layers them up into planes, right? So you have near plane and outer plane, and this is all part of digital technology that's used in filmmaking. And if you've heard of post-production, that's where somebody is acting, and then they might come along behind them and make it look like they're standing in some mountains when they're actually standing inside of a set in Burbank, California, right? So that's the post-production. So all that was known technology. But what he said was, why don't we take all this, and what we'll do is we will digitize it, and then we will go inside and we will create this theater that's 150 foot in diameter. And now what happens is we'll create the street, and people will walk down the street. And what we'll do is we'll project these images onto the walls around us such that it looks totally lifelike, and the actors are actually acting in the environment in which they want to be, and they can see the environment. They're not imagining the environment like you would in front of a green screen. You would actually, it's projected, you can see it. And then we're filming it, right? What this does is allows not only the actors to have a better perception of the scene they're in, but it now dramatically lowers the cost, because now I'm not having to fly everybody to a remote location. I just recently watched this movie that was shot in Oklahoma, for example, and you can imagine they were out in the wilderness of the northeast part of Oklahoma. You got to fly these actors in. You got to have a place for them to stay. Now what happens is you have them in a city. So the actors come to the city. All the people that are going to work on it come into the city, and you have complete control. You say, we're going to shoot for 4 days. It's 4 days. And you go inside this building, and you can say what the temperature is. You want it to be a warm day, a sunny day, you have that. If you want it to be a cool, wet day, you have that. Whatever environment you want to have. So what it does is it changes filmmaking so that you're not doing so much on site and you're not doing so much in post-production, but you're in fact doing it early in production. Now, this is a multi-million dollar setup that he has to create. But the reality is that when people came in and used it, they found that it was really good, like really good. So let me give you one example of a green screen. They shot the Mandalorian in this guy's initial setup. One of the first things they ever did was shot Mandalorian. And it turned out that the Mandalorian the actor has a costume that's chrome. In front of a green screen, the green keeps shining off of the chrome. And so you can't use a green screen. Everything's got to be done real. Well, because his is projection, the Mandalorian could walk around inside of it. So cut the production time way, way down. Now, initially, the marketplace reaction to this was a negative. The people who are film producers and TV producers and series producers, their initial reaction was, oh, why would I want to do this? I could just put a set in Burbank, use a set at Fox or someplace, Paramount, and then I'll do the post-production elements on it, and I'll just keep it in-house. Well, the problem was that that's fine if everything you're doing is shot in an apartment building, for example, or some simple set. But if you have these sets where it's outdoors, it gets a lot more complicated. If you have multiple sets, it gets a lot more complicated. So what he actually saw was this need to control the environment in order to be more effective at filmmaking. Now, here's the good part. Once he goes and shoots a whole bunch of pictures in Brooklyn, he's got those to use. So now the second person calls up and says, well, I want to do a New York scene. He can produce it. And
Right.
he can sit there and he has a whole bunch of shots of subways that are going around. And he tells the director, look, whenever you want a subway in the back, whether you want one subway or you want to have a subway every 3 minutes or whatever you want, we'll produce a subway. So now you're not at the whim of the
Right.
New York subway system or the Chicago subway system. You're not at the whim of a train system.
Yeah.
What he could do is he could layer in the cars. You want how many you want in the background, how fast you want them, what your model you want them. You could have the subway. And then what he does is he takes pictures of people and he changes them. So like if he took a picture of me on the street randomly, there's no law that says, okay, you can take my picture on the street. There's nothing I can do to stop you from doing that. But I can tell you cannot put my image in a movie. You have to get my permission if you want to do that. So what he does is he takes and uses artificial intelligence to
Interesting.
change my face such that it doesn't look like me. Now it's not me. Now I'm not an actor. Now he's just taken an image and he's portrayed this image. Now he can use these. So he's building a library of sets, and he's building a library of the background characters that can be used over and over and over by the people who come in to do the shooting. So the people who thought this was risky, the movie makers, they didn't really think that they wanted it. But now that he's got it done, and now that he's demonstrating it, and people can see the efficiency of what he's doing, they say, oh, wow, man, I always needed something like this. I just didn't realize I could. So what he did was he identified a poorly met need, which is how do we shoot on site, right? And how do we turn an on-site into a set production so that we could be more effective at it? Then how do I make it such a way that I'm using the same materials over and again so I can use it second, third, fourth, 50, 60, 70 times, and thereby the cost will continue to decline. He's getting actually an economy of scale in film production or in video production that's not been that much available for. Yeah, you could have video that you could shoot onto a green screen, but his is so much more elaborate. And like I said, he could call in a subway, he could call in a truck, he could call in all the different sort of elements you'd want in an outdoor environment that you would desire, and he can put them real time on spot. And so it's because of the fact that there was this need, and he really met this need, that I think the guy's got 100% probability of being very, very successful. He's working now to try to get people to come in. To be honest with you, the location he has is pretty remote. He's not in a major city. He's in a city of about 100,000 people in central Canada. And it's not terribly well served by the airlines, but it's very, very inexpensive facility. I mean, the bare bones facility he built this in, he got a little bit of grant money from the provincial government to get started. And we discussed, could he put one of these in, for example, Burbank, California? And the answer was yes, you could, but it would be remarkably expensive. He said that Amazon has done something similar in Burbank, but then Amazon has billions and billions of dollars that they could do for their creation. But this is, I think, just the first one. I think now that people get started using them, he'll be putting them in places that perhaps aren't as remote as central Canada. But so like you could imagine putting something like this in, say, Fresno, California, or putting it in Tucson.
Right. This sounds a lot like, if you're a Star Trek fan, there was something called a holodeck, where the actors would come in and the characters would come in and interact with whatever, and they could call up a program and it would be, basically projected onto the around them. They could interact with people. The Matrix, of course, the movies had something similar for the training facility. And so very compelling idea. And I think you kind of illustrate the fact that there is an unmet or poorly met need.
Right.
And then on the other side, of course, is the driving forces of these trends. AI, without AI, this would not really work. Without all the computation behind it, wouldn't work. Of course, the real estate component is going to be more available, especially as commercial real estate becomes more of a boat anchor. So it sounds very interesting.
And one of the things that, as I was discussing with him, remember I said that initially he showed it to the industry and they were poo-pooed the idea, right? Well, what he was doing was showing people who were traditionalists, this is the way it's always done. Now what's happening, though, is we're graduating every year more filmmakers at UCLA, USC, other universities. We're graduating a lot of journalism majors right there at Tucson, right? And there are people, so journalism majors running shows like Frontline, for example. So, documentaries, and they need, in addition to the onset, they're going to need a lot of other stuff. Well, these filmmakers are out there making film today with an iPhone. Like they're literally using an iPhone to make 10-minute movies and that kind of thing,
Hmm.
that to try to get some notoriety. The iPhone has now become one of the old Super 8 camera used to be back when people were trying to get started in the business. Those people are very ready to jump in and
Hmm.
say,
Oh
I
yeah.
don't want to do it the old way, I'm ready to do it the new way. So the reality that these younger people are going to find, hey, this is more predictable, more cost effective, just like it's been, for a long time. The younger people are more likely to jump in and use it earlier. That plus people that are, as you said, people that are thinking about the Marvel movies and going down that kind of a road. That now all of a sudden this becomes a much cheaper way to make a Marvel movie than
Yeah.
using a traditional set in central Los Angeles, somewhere
Right.
in
And we've
LA.
talked about this before, that the whole media and entertainment business is fundamentally changing with the advent of social media and YouTube movies. There's several feature length movies that were shot completely on an iPhone, not just 10-minute ones.
Yeah,
And we've kind of joked that, at least I have, that Dwayne the Rock Johnson might be the last megastar, because now you're getting all these sort of micro stars that are very much aligned with a small niche group, and this would be very convenient for that segment that is growing at an ever changing pace.
yeah. Yeah, so I think he's really caught on. He identified a poorly met need. He found a way to solve the problems, which is this producing outside of a set. How would I do it? How would I bring it into a set? And then now, after as he got started, he's finding leverage in it. As he sells more of it, he's getting more leverage in terms of reuse, product reuse, and it's become what I think will become a flourishing form of filmmaking. And payback, I think, really, really, really well for him as the inventor and the innovator getting started. And I'm predicting he's going to have several of these set up in the next few years. Like I said, you could put one where it's geographically a little easier to accommodate folks, like say a Tucson or Portland, Oregon, or maybe outside of Chicago, some places like that. Again, you could get the big building, set it up, and make it easy for the actors and the camera people, all those folks to show up.
Interesting.
So that wasn't people were turned off initially because it was such a different method, and it was so expensive to build. And his point of view was, yeah, but it solves a problem. And that's what I think folks forget, is that the businesses that succeed are ones that solve problems, right? And then if you get out there and make it happen, you learn all the little nooks and little tricks you have to pull by
Hmm.
serving the customer. And he's been at it now for a couple of years, and now he's really getting to know the customers well. And he has that one facility, as he sold out the capacity for something like 2 years into the future. That's why I think that people will be clamoring with him to build additional facilities pretty darn quickly.
Right. I remember as a kid, I would have to. We had one video store in my hometown, and at least in the very beginning, and we'd have to ride our bikes to the video store. We'd rent a couple of VHS tapes, and we'd take them home for overnight. It was you couldn't hold them for more than a day or two, and
Mm-hmm.
then you had, of course, rewind them, and there was a whole framework associated with that. And of course, I'm talking about Netflix, what they did with the whole idea of
Yeah.
getting them in the mail, the DVDs in the mail, and then of course they take that other leap into the streaming space, and then another leap into the production studio space. I mean, I think if at every point along the way there was naysayers that were saying, "What's happening here? This is not the way we do things." And of course, we all know that Netflix is an innovator, or
Yeah.
Uber, right? Here I am. I'm going to call a random stranger on my phone to come pick me up and take me someplace. You know, rewind 10 years, that was unheard of, and now it's commonplace. But I think at every step along the way, there was this whole big pushback from either the taxi cab drivers or all the other more established transportation methods. And here we are, Uber, Lyft, they're all over the place.
So when we talk to entrepreneurs, small business people, when the direction we always come from is, one, have you identified a poorly met need, something a need that somebody has? In this case, this control of the set environment, so you could have control of costs and people, and you could be on time, on schedule, that kind of a thing, would cost. The second thing was they developed this value proposition, which is what I just said. Hey, we'll keep your on time, on cost. You'll be able to manage your business much more effectively than dealing with all the random events of trying to go shoot in a location outside of a set. Then he built the value delivery system. And that was going and taking all these photographs and building the software and the projectors and the room. And he put that whole thing into a value delivery system. So the value delivery system came last after he did the first two,
Mm-hmm.
identifying the need and figuring out the value proposition. Now, the second one I want to talk about is one that went the other direction. They developed the product, and now they're in search of a value
Okay.
proposition. And but the thing is that it's really cool. So what this guy did was he developed a brand new all-terrain vehicle. And most people out there really enjoy new cars and new planes, new transportation. We love that, right? And we like to go, even if you're not going to buy a motorcycle, it's fun to go look at motorcycles. It's fun to go look at big trucks and big tractors. It's fun to look at them, even if you're never going to drive one or have a need for one. Well, this guy figured out how to make a better ATV. And
Okay.
his better ATV is really strong. He's got all kinds of advantages. And when I met the guy, he started right off with, here are the features and functions of my ATV. Here's why it looks like this. Here's what I put into it in all these different places. Here's how I made this really, really good ATV. Here's why the way you operate it happens that you stand on it rather than sit. And he had a whole lot of reasons that was a good thing. So he's telling me all of these advantages of the product, right? And I asked him, I said, well, what was the need that you set out to solve? And he said, to make a better ATV. So we talked for 2 hours. And one of the things I asked him, I said, how do you know you're not the next Segway? I mean, Segway was this really cool thing. I don't know if some people have maybe forgotten Segway by now because it's gone, but it was a 2-wheel device. You stood on it and it rolled down the street, right? And so it was kind of I don't even know how to really describe it. It's kind of think of it as a hand truck that you rode on, and it was powered and you could ride on it. But the thing was that they sold a bunch of them to the post office. They found some places, some niche markets for them, but the product never really took off. And it had some problems that if you didn't control it, you can have an accident. They had some bad publicity. George Bush was given an opportunity to ride one and he crashed it. So it didn't go very well. And then eventually the developer of the product.
Actually, the president, the president that took over from Dean Kamen died.
Yes. The president
in
of
an
the company
accident.
died riding one. He was killed in a crash riding one, which pretty much ended the company at that point.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, he said, there's one of those things like you saw it on the news, you saw it on television, you heard about it. And when you see it, you think, that's really cool. And some people may see these still today. If you go to where they do walking tours in places like New Orleans, San Francisco, some of these places, nice towns, you can do a Segway tour. You pay some money, you get one of these Segways, you have a leader, and he takes you around town, and you can do the walking tour riding on the Segway. So you might still see a few of them out there today in operation. And of course, some people bought them. They weren't all that expensive. They were about $5,000. Now, it depends on what you consider expensive. $5,000 isn't a lot compared to a car. Right. It's not a lot compared to a good motorcycle, a roadworthy motorcycle today. And it's quite a bit, though. $5,000 is a little bit for just a toy. Not a lot of people drop $6,000 on a toy, especially this thing came out like 20 years ago was when it got started.
Right. I remember the founder said that when he unveiled it, he made an announcement that this invention, he didn't even say what it was at the time, will revolutionize the way that cities are designed.
Yes.
That was very bold of him to say that. And of course, they're like you said, kind of for walking tours and like random things.
Yeah. I mean, he envisioned everybody would have one of these Segways, or it would be kind of like the where you can rent a scooter now. In the city, you go and you can rent the scooter, drive somewhere, you drop it off. That he thought the Segway would have that marketplace. It would all be in Chicago and New York. We'd be out on our Segways. And then the revolutionary part was he thought we would come to a major urban areas. We would park our cars in the outskirts of the urban area, and we would use Segways. So you would get all over, it would take something the size of Tucson even. If you got to get from one side of Tucson to the other to a meeting or around 20 blocks, that's a real pain, right? You got to move your car and park it. Sometimes the weather's not very helpful. You don't want to walk 20 blocks if it's 105 degrees. So you're trying to figure out how you're going to do this. So he thought we would park our cars and everybody would Segway all the way around. Well, the problem was they didn't actually really meet any really particular unmet need, because people would say, I have a bicycle, I can walk, and I have a car. And if I don't want to use a car, I can use a taxi or I could use an Uber to get around. So I had ways of solving the problem. And when he sold them to the post office said, well, the days of driving up in somebody's front yard and putting the mail on their porch are really gone. What we're doing is we're making people have, everybody sees them now, these clusters of boxes, and we just drive a truck where we can put the mail for 30 or 40 houses in one place. So for us, it's much more efficient to just tell everybody, look, we're not going to deliver to your house anymore. you're going to have to get a box at the end of the street, and we're going to have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 of these boxes. So you're going to go down there. So when you really got into the needs of what a person had, they're sort of like, I don't really need a Segway because I could use a cab. I don't really need a Segway because I could, it was a post office, I could take it down to the corner. If you were a policeman, they're kind of like, I don't really quite get why I would use this Segway to get around. I have other alternatives.
So this guy's ATV, what's special about it?
Well, see, that was the point. He will give you an hour of what's special about his ATV. And I will say, it looked to me like a lot of fun. I mean, seriously, I asked him how he had made 25, I think it's either 25 or 50 of them, and he had sold them all. And he'd sold them for about $25,000 a piece. It turned out that almost all of those were sold to people that could afford a $25,000 toy. And so people were toys. So I really started to nail him. I said, where is this really going to be a need? And they started talking about, well, it's really good for military application. He said, because, you could operate this thing in a standing position, so you use firearms, etc. He said, if every soldier had one of these, instead of having a $100,000 Hummer with 4 people in it, you can have 4 soldiers independently operate. Oh, I forgot to mention, the thing's made out, it's electric. It's not gas. It's electric. And because it's electric, it makes no sound. And also, it could go underwater because the battery's all sealed up. Now, you don't want to park it underwater, but you could, say, drive it through a creek or a river or something like that, which you can't do on a regular ATV because it's gas-powered and it would flat out with the water and carburetors, et cetera. So he's sitting there like, hey, here would be a really good application for the Army. I'm like, that's interesting. So have you gone to the Army and identified the unmet need and written it down and then designed for that unmet need? And so, well, I'm hoping that they're going to do that. He says, I want to try to get 2 of them into an evaluation and see if we could get that. Oh, okay. Then he said, hey, fire and rescue. This is great because you could take this up the sides of these hills. The way it's built, you could go up very steep hills, and it's not very likely to fall over. It's got a lot of advantages to be used in fire and rescue, especially in a non-urban fire rescue environment, right? So you want to get around, where you're having wildfires, like in California, Canada, even in Arizona, we've had wildfires. And you said, this would be a great tool to use there. You know what? I could visualize that. I said, have you talked to the fire departments? Have you put one out there with a fire department and had them go with it and come back to you and tell you what worked, what didn't? How did it compare with that's having all the guys in pickup trucks and doing a real, heads up comparison to find out what that need is that you really fulfilled? Well, he's hoping to. Yeah. He said maybe police departments could use them because now police departments are using a combination of horses and ATVs and cars and pickup trucks. And he said one thing, this thing, when you stand on it, you're operating, your eyes are about 7 foot, 7'1", so you're up above the crowd. So crowd control could be an application for it. So he's in his mind he's imagined these, and then they all, when you first hear them, like, that's right, I could imagine that. How are we doing in terms of getting the police to come out and say, this is a great solution, what the unmet need is that you meet? Well, he's hoping to. Yeah. He's hoping to. He's trying to get, he's going to try to get some more built and he's going to try to see if he can take them out and loan them to some police departments to have them evaluated.
Right.
So I'm pretty worried for this guy, right? Not because he didn't make a great product. I'd love to have one. I mean, honestly, I'm kind of a weirdo that way. I like toys and some motorized toys, and I think it'd be fun to have this thing that I saw. I did not do a test run on it, but it really was pretty interesting. Then I thought, this could be something that's not that hard to make. I looked at all the componentry. He could set up shop pretty much anywhere. So if somebody wanted to grant him give him a manufacturing grant to put his business in Wisconsin or Arizona or someplace, he could do that. He could move the business and set it up wherever he wanted to. So there's all kinds of flexibility in it, all kinds of opportunities. But the problem is we don't yet know what the unmet need is.
Yes.
Or whether his value delivery system will fit that unmet need. We think it will. It looks like it might. But since I don't have a clear handle on the need and what they would pay for that need to get that need solved, how it would be financially beneficial. Either it's a need that you just can't, I'll pay whatever. I don't care what the price is. I'll pay it. Like in military. Military says, I have this need to win battles. You give me something better and I'll pay it, right, to win battles. Right. I was kind of like, how would this help you win a battle? Well, again, he's coming back to, if I had 24 guys, I'd take 6 Hummers And he said, this way I could have 24 guys with 24 independent standalone systems going 24 different directions. Okay.
You're right.
Is that
I
better?
think this is a lot of results of the way that engineering schools are operated, a way that business schools are operated. They're sort of backwards. In engineering school, I'm a mechanical engineer. I know you're an electrical engineer, Adam. We were never taught about anything to do with an unmet need. We were taught about the classical design method, the waterfall method, where literally the requirements are poured down from above to one level and to the next level. We were never taught about unmet needs, and we were never taught about what it really takes to make a product successful in the business domain. And I didn't go to business school, but I have lots of friends that are in the business school and graduated, and the dean of the business school. And I've been involved with the business school here in Tucson, as well as up in ASU. And they're getting more in the sync of the way we're talking, but they're not quite there yet either. There's still a big thing about the market assessment. And when you're talking about a small business or a startup, your first year is a make or break year. And if you don't have a viable unmet need, and you don't have a target customer that you've spoken with, that you've had long discussions with, that would actually even buy it, maybe pre-buy it, then your chance of success goes down significantly.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I'd have known this guy a couple of years ago, and he would have talked to these markets. I always said, here's what let's do. Let's mock one up, not even make it, just mock it up. Let's go sit down with some friendly police departments, and let's go around until we get somebody who says, you know what, if you could make this to this spec, I would buy 2 of them. And you say, okay, would you give me like a little bit of money so that I got you committed on it, so that I'll know you're going to buy 2 of them? So you would have built the product specifically for this unmet need. You would have talked to them and said, where's the real weakness in your military approach? Where's the weakness in your police approach, your fire and rescue approach? And, where's that real pain point? And then I could write it down and say, if I solve that, would this be a no-brainer for you to buy this product, right? And then you make a few of them and you take it, they test it, they go, wow, that test was so good that now if you can tell me you can make this for a certain price, I'll line item it into the budget. Line item onto the budget will make it happen. So that's the part that I would say, I volunteered for this guy. I'm going to go around and try to see if I can get some people interested. I think his product's really cool, and I like to see him have a chance at success. But the big thing is right now he's got to find that need, and until he finds that need, he's shooting shots off into the dark. And that old field of dreams, phrase, build it and they will come, is just the worst possible thing in entrepreneurship. Right. You build it hoping that the customers will come. It's really, you got to find the customer, find the need, get your value prop right, then build it.
Right.
Build it for the need. And what we see here is two people went at it. One went at it the right way. The other one went at it, he's got a pretty neat
the harder
tool.
Way.
But yeah, whether he's going to make it over the hump, hard to tell. Yep. I mean,
the Eric Ries method, the lean startup method, where you go out and do the minimum viable product, and you go talk to 100 customers and this and that. I think there's a tiny thread of value, but what they don't really stress enough is finding those customers first, and finding that pioneer customer that has at least a beachhead into a bigger market. Like you said, if you went and talked to a dozen police departments and they said, you know what, if you did these certain things, then it would be interesting. The fact he hasn't done that is definitely concerning. Same thing with the military, same thing with all these other, fire and rescue aspects.
As we close this out, I told him a story I'll tell you real quick, and that was Motorola. So Motorola made two-way radios in World War II, right? And then war was over and they made all the radios that went into our automobiles, those AM radios. But one of the things they did was they took the two-way radio technology and they started going to police departments and fire departments. And for many, many years, every police department, fire department had two-way radios. Now they all use cell phones, right? But back in the two-way radio days, Motorola dominated. And the way they dominated, I'll never forget this guy telling me the story. They were out there talking to the police about it. And the police guys would say that they wanted to be able to talk on the radio and they wanted to grab the antenna and whip and hit the bad guy in the head with it, with the radio. Like, because they didn't have billy clubs anymore. So they wanted a radio that was really strong. And when they said drop it, they were like, yeah, but not really. It's really, I want to hold on to that antenna and use it, whip the guy upside the head with it. And so Motorola went out and they developed their radio such that it was a steel case. It was heavy. Somebody else made just a good radio with light and all that stuff, but it didn't last. And what they did was they go back and they'd say, the radio has to has to meet a spec where you like drop it off a 20-foot tall ladder and hit the ground and it continue to operate. Or you had to be able to hold it by the antenna and do some tests with it, and it would continue to operate. So when they got that spec'd in, nobody else met that spec. And that was how they kept their business. It wasn't because they had that much of a better radio. It was that they had a radio that the policeman said, if I'm holding it with one hand and a bad guy comes along, I can whack him upside the head with it. And that's the thing. We've got to know your customer. Where is the customer's pain point? His pain point wasn't a radio. Having something to whack the bad guy on the head with, that was his pain point, right? And so know your customer. That's the big thing I want people to walk away with.
Very well said, Adam. Know your customer, know your market, follow trends, and of course, listen to Spark Partners Business Trendsetter.
Thanks a lot, man.
Take care.